Hey, everybody. Welcome and thank you for coming to our webinar this afternoon. I'm Donna Sumner, for those of you who we haven't met yet. I'm a project manager with the digital services team. And of course, Erica Rowe is my great colleague, who you probably already know as our service desk lead and also outreach coordinator, will be co-presenting today. We're going to talk about images on GovHub. We're going to hit some of the things we get a lot of questions about, and maybe even more questions about since we launched Bloom. So we want to just be sure that everybody kind of has the basics down. So we can go ahead and get started. All right, our agenda for today. So we will talk about image basics. I'm not a designer. I'm assuming most of you are not designers either. So we're going to talk in layman's terms here and learn about some terminology and some constraints in the GovHub system that the more you know, kind of the easier it's going to be to get your images the way you want them to be on your websites. It's a little confusing, so we'll try to clarify some of that. We'll move on to some common image placements and some tips and tricks for some of those that are most used. Most of what we're going to discuss has to do with landing pages, because really that's where most of the images are on GovHub, but we'll also talk about interior pages too, to the extent that you might drop images there. And then we're going to finish with some image resources, some tools that you might find useful, some tricks on how to use those tools for certain things on GovHub. So hopefully you'll learn a lot from this. Feel free to put questions in if you have them, and we'll be happy to answer those or follow up if we non-designers don't know the answer. We'll get those answers to you, but we hope this is really useful. All right, so let's get started with image basics. All righty, so a couple of terms that we're going to need to know: aspect ratio and dimension. And you've probably heard these terms before, but let me explain the difference of these terms. So aspect ratio is an important one, and it refers to the shape of your image. You might hear a 4:3 aspect ratio or something like that, which means it's 4 wide by 3 high. We have a whole slide about that, so we'll get into it. But it's different from dimension. Dimension is the actual size of your image. Whatever shape it is, it's how big it actually is. You'll usually hear that in pixels in GovHub, like it's 100 pixels by 200 pixels or something like that. Another term that you're going to want to know, what you don't have to know the term so much as the concept, but it's image styles. Image styles are something that GovHub applies to the images that you upload depending on the placement. So for example, a promo has an image style that's applied to it, and the image style presets the dimension, the size, as well as the aspect ratio, the shape. And that's how it looks so neat on GovHub. You know, we don't have all kinds of different crazy stuff going on. It's the promos look a certain kind of way. It's because of the image styles that are applied. And so we'll clue you in about these common placements, what aspect ratio and what size is the system expecting. And that way you're going to have a better chance of having a really neat looking image. And the other term you'll want to know is file size. Sometimes you'll hear us say image size or file size, and don't get that confused with dimension. What we're talking about there is the weight, like how many megabytes is the image, because the bigger the weight, the slower it is to actually download onto your screen or on your mobile phone. So we have some tips about how big an image should be as far as image size too. So let's jump into aspect ratio and dimension. So this is a good slide to kind of show what we mean by the shape. So you see a 4:3 aspect ratio on the second row. It means it's 4 units wide by 3 units high. So it's a little more rectangular than a square. It doesn't matter what the unit is. It could be a mile, it could be a pixel. It's just the shape, you know, that's kind of determined by that ratio. A 1:1 is a perfect square. A 3:2 is a little bit more of a squatty rectangle. So we use these image aspect ratios in the styles that are applied to the images you upload on GovHub. So we'll be able to clue you in as to what aspect ratio to use for different stuff. Now, we also have dimensions in the image style, like this image might show at this particular size. In GovHub, with these preset styles, I'll tell you a tip. It's always smart to upload a bigger image in dimension than what you need but let that image be as close to the aspect ratio that's needed as possible. So let me break that down. You want an image that's larger than the space that's allowed, because our images in GovHub stretch to fill the space because it's predetermined. So if you upload an itty bitty one, but the system wants a big one in dimension, it's going to stretch it and it won't look very nice. But if you have a bigger one than the system needs, it's just going to shrink it. So it'll still look very high quality. It won't have to like stretch, to where it gets pixelated. So a bigger image in dimension than what you need, but let it approximate the aspect ratio of what the system's expecting, because then you won't get weird crops. Here's my dog, sorry. He joined too. He was interested in dimensions and aspect ratio. Okay, so all right, so we're set. So your tip on GovHub, a bigger dimension than what you need, the approximate aspect ratio of what the system is going to look for, you'll get your best results. All right, so for some of us that aren't designers, there's some trial and error involved. But once you get those concepts down and kind of get a feel for what the system's expecting, it's really not that bad. So I'm going to pass it over now to Erica to talk about some of these specific image placements and give you some tips.
Awesome. Thank you, Donna. So as Donna said, I'm Erica Rowe. I'll be kicking us off today with commonly used image placements in GovHub. For the first one, we're going to go over image blocks. So these are a relatively new feature that we've made available to content managers, but I think that they're a great way to liven up a landing page if there's somewhere that you want a user's focal to go right to. So for this content type, remember Donna said you always kind of want to aim to upload a larger image than what you need. For this content type, an image around 2000 pixels is great if you can achieve that. The aspect ratio on image blocks, there's two different options that are available to you here. So there's a 2:1 ratio, and that works best for images that are wide and horizontal, like the one you see on the right-hand side, the first one. There's also a 3:2 ratio, and that one works best for slightly less wide images. It's more of a square, but as you can see, it's still not great if you need like a vertical placement. Dimension-wise, for a 2:1 ratio, the widest screen is going to display that image at around 875 pixels by 437 pixels. And then for a 3:2 ratio, the widest screen will display those at around 700 pixels by 468 pixels. And images in an image block, they're going to grow to fill the prescribed space. So again, that's why you'll want to use a larger image than what you need so it doesn't end up looking pixelated. You always want to make sure once you found a picture and an image that you like, it's going to look its best. So here's an example of how an image block is used on a landing page. This one uses a featured intro, and this is a new content type that a new layout that we introduced with the design refresh. And this is the only layout that is half and half. So it's a really nice option if you want something that looks a little bit balanced on your landing page. So this is a featured intro on the Pardons and Paroles website. Since this image block here has a prescribed aspect ratio, you know that what it's going to show in the picture. You may need to adjust the image's center or focal point to kind of adjust the crop where you want it, just to make sure no one's head gets cropped up off at the top, especially if you have a group like this where some folks are taller and some folks are shorter. But I'm going to show you an example of how you can adjust that focal point in a couple of slides. So up next, we're going to go over images in promos. Promos are one of the most popular micro content types to use on a landing page. So like the image block, it's best to start out again with a larger image than what you need. 2000 pixels wide, again, is your best option. Even though promos can be used with different layout options, they all have an aspect ratio of 4:3. The image will be a bit more wide than square with this ratio. Again, images grow to fit the space. The largest rendering here will be 720 by 540. And I did see that we have a hand up. If you don't mind to put your question in the Q&A or the chat, we'll make sure to get to you. So in this slide, here's an example of what a promo looks at, like at full width versus at a third width. The design here is laid out differently, but this is a good way of showing that 4:3 aspect ratio. It's constant no matter what width you put it in, a full width, a 2/3 width, or a third width. The same portion of the koala shows in both here. So next, I'm going to cover tiles. I will say tiles are a little bit tricky for me sometimes just because of how they crop and how they lay out. But I have a few tips and tricks that I can share. Tiles use a 4:3 aspect ratio. We do currently have a bit of an issue where they display it as 16:9. So it's best to approximate that 4:3 aspect ratio before you upload, so you don't have to worry about it, the crop as much. You can see here on my slide, I've got an example tile set with 3 different tiles. In GovHub, there's a really neat feature called Preview, and it's going to show you what your image will look like in the various aspect ratios. You'll be able to access it when you upload a photo. So you can see here in the back end where I've uploaded the photo, or you can locate an existing photo in your media library and go into the edit menu. And to get to preview, you can click on the little magnifying glass under the picture where it says preview. This is going to bring up the images preview that you see here on my screen. And like I said, it's really neat because it shows you exactly what it's going to look like in all the various aspect ratios. I find it useful because you can kind of see the original image as you go through and see the different aspect ratios. And that kind of lets you know, hey, I may need to adjust the focal point. I may need to do a little bit of a crop. May need to upload a larger image. So it's a good little trick to have. If you need to adjust the focal point of your picture, again, in edit or when you upload, there's a little crosshair right here that you see. It looks like a plus sign. You can drag and drop this exactly where you want it. So you can see in the tile set that I featured a few slides back, I didn't like how the top of the dog's head was cropped. So I drug the crosshairs up a little bit to right below her eye. And in the next slide, you can see this is the before where the head was cropped off slightly. And just where I adjusted the focal point slightly, it made it so that her head was not cropped out. So it's a good little trick to have to be able to adjust the crop, see the preview of it, and so forth. Another trick that you can use with tiles is to place some padding around your image to achieve the desired crop. This is useful if you're using logos, seals, or clip art type of imagery. I'm going to go over this more when we get to the resources section and do a little bit of a demo to show you exactly how to do that and play around with it so you get the correct kind of crop that you want. But for now, I'm going to pass it back over to Donna so she can talk about images and our remaining content types.
Okay, thank you. That's Erica's dog. So both of our dogs are making an appearance in this session. So, okay, heroes. Let's talk about heroes. Heroes are really popular on GovHub. That's the big one across the top of the screen. A lot of sites use it. It's got a nice big kind of flashy picture with a little bit of text to the side. I'll show you an example. This one has been a little bit problematic for some folks because it's hard to find just the right image to put in this space. So I want to give you some tips about this. On this one, it's a little less predictable, not too bad, but the aspect ratio flexes a little bit. And it depends on how much text you put in because it could be taller or a little bit squattier. I'll show you an example of that, but it's always horizontal. It's really wide. And we would recommend that you find a really wide picture to put in there. That's about 2,400 pixels across. Even though the maximum size it'll show is about 1,100, we'd like it to start a little bit bigger than it needs to be. And some tips about this, the picture that you want to select is you want the focal point, like the interest of your picture, to be as close to the center, dead center as you can. So a little bit of space on the right and left, a little bit of space on the top and bottom, just in case it crops a little bit weird. You won't lose your focal point. And of course, let it be horizontal. So I have an example on the next slide. Yes. So this picture is irrelevant to anything, but if you let that be to the side, it's a perfect picture for a hero, I think. So it's horizontal. It's giant. This is 2,400 pixels across. You can't tell that right here, but the focus of the image is right there in the center. To me, the focus is the face of this animal, the bear. There's plenty of room on all sides if we get a little weird cropping going on. So this is the image I selected for the example. So we'll move to the next slide. I built a hero and I adjusted how much text there is on this hero. So the one at the top, I hope you can see it, but I used the maximum character count that's available in the hero. So that's as tall as it's ever going to be. And there's a link and everything. On the one below it, I used just a couple of words, which is, your choice. You can do whatever you want. But you see what I mean about the aspect ratio being just a little bit flexible. The one on the top is taller because the text is more. The one on the bottom is squattier, because the text doesn't take up that much space. But on both of them, the bear's face is pinned to the center because that's the image that we selected. The focal point is there in the center. So you can see that it's cropped proportionally on the one on the bottom, like it took away top and bottom from it. It's not right because it cut off his feet a little bit more than I wanted it to. So there are ways to make it better, even though it's a pretty good image. So on the next slide, I'll show you, I just put that as a break so we won't get confused on the next one. Thank you. This is how I made this one better. I saw it, I decided I want to use the maximum character count. So I'm using that as kind of my first try. And I see where his feet are cropped off a little bit. So I know how big this image is going to be now, given the text that I've already kind of set in there. So I took the image back onto my desktop and used an image processing software to crop it. I cropped some of that headspace off. I wanted my bear to go up a little bit in the display. So I just kind of cropped it, but kept the width the same. And then I re-uploaded the image to try again. And on my second try with the new kind of edited image, you can see I got his feet in frame. I just took away some headroom on the top. So all that to say with heroes, choose your image carefully, but let yourself have some trial and error. It may take two tries to get it just right. If it takes more than 2 or 3 tries, you might want to try a different image. You might be trying too hard to get that one image in that space. But generally, if you follow these guidelines, give it a try, crop it a little bit if you need to. You should be just fine. The next slide is going to show the different presentation of a hero. We have what the previous one was the large hero. This one is called the condensed hero. It takes up a little bit less space. It's condensed, but the dimension is the same of the image. Like it's still going to have the flexible aspect ratio. It's still going to be the same amount of pixels wide. In this one, the text might carry over a little bit more over your image. So that's kind of a gotcha that I just want to give you a little tip about. Like in this image, it's okay, but maybe if the bear was facing the other way, that white box would kind of get in his face a little bit. You might want to adjust it. So the thing to do there again is take a look at how it's going to be, pick how much text you want, and then take that image back onto your desktop and crop it a little bit. So on the next slide, I overcorrected just to make a point, but I cropped the image by cutting off a little bit on the right side, and that shifted my bear over from dead center just a little bit over. Too much, obviously, but that's how you can kind of adjust it. Get it in there, get the text you like, see what changes need to be made, and crop the image one time and see if it helps you get it just how you want it. So heroes are tricky, but they're really impactful. They're really worth it. People love them. You can get a lot across in an image, but give yourself the grace of maybe 1 or 2 tries to get it just right. So, all right. Another one on landing pages that's pretty popular and it's new with Bloom is called Spotlight. Spotlights are a lot like promos. They're a 4:3 aspect ratio. All placements, the shape, the aspect ratio is the same. The dimension changes, it might be bigger or smaller, but it's going to be the same aspect ratio. And like other ones, the image will grow to fit that space. The space is predetermined by the system. So you want to start with an image that's bigger in dimension, but similar in aspect ratio to what you're going to need. So start with 2000 pixels if you can, and let it be a 4:3 aspect ratio, and you should be good to go. So I'll show you an example on the next screen. This is a spotlight. So we have the 1/3 placement over there on the left, and then the full width or 2/3 really look the same. Even though the layout's different, you can see that image, even with different dimension, is the same shape, the same part of that dog is going to show on both of those pictures. It's a 4:3 aspect ratio. So and we'll have this documented in our knowledge base, the largest rendering on the biggest screen is going to be 720 by 540. So if you start with an image that's bigger than that, but the same aspect ratio, you should be good to go. All right. And the next placement we'll talk about, we're leaving landing pages right now, and we're going to move into interior page. So topic pages. You can drop an image directly on a topic page. I don't know if everybody knows that, but it's part of the WYSIWYG. There's a little button where you can drop an image right on, and you can set the image to show on the right side, the left side, or full width. Now, this is different from the ones on the landing pages. There isn't a preset aspect ratio for these, but there is space on the screen that is kind of allocated for the image. So you want to choose your image carefully. I'll give you some display size information here. We'll also have it documented in the knowledge base. But on the biggest screen, a full width image is going to have about 872 pixels wide. And then the right or left embed is around 428. I say around 428 is kind of specific, but in that neighborhood. So that's how much space the system is leaving for the image if you want an image right or left. So you want to pick an image that's about that size so that it doesn't look weird. If it's too big, the system will size it down, but if it's too small, it won't. So I'll show you an example of that. So on a topic page, if you don't mind switching, thank you, Erica. This is an example of the same image that's dropped as a right embed and a left embed. And you can see they're both the same size. The maximum is 428. The aspect ratio is flexible. It could be a vertical image there if you want it to be. It's not preset with an image style. The next slide will show what a full width versus a left embed looks like. The full width is about, I think I said 872 pixels wide. But the next slide, I think, is going to show you the gotcha with images on topic pages. I took our bear again, but I sized him down really, really small. I think this is somewhere around 100 or 150 pixels in dimension. So my image I'm starting with is itty bitty, and I uploaded it onto this topic page, and you can see it doesn't grow to fit the space, but the space is still reserved for the image. And so it looks a little bit weird. It looks a little bit lost, in my opinion. So that's why we would suggest that you find an image that, is approximately the size of the space that's available, because the system isn't going to try to stretch that image and make it pixelated. It's just going to have it floating kind of in that open space. So a little tip for topic pages: pick the image you want, the aspect ratio, but know those dimensions and try to approximate the right size so it doesn't float or look lost in your space. So, Erica, back to you then for resources.
Perfect. Thank you, Donna. So we have several resources that can help you out with images on your agency's website. Our knowledge base has an article on image optimization. That's going to contain guidance around the best sizes for your images and free tools available to you that can help you reduce file size if needed. The article on image dimensions is a handy resource. It contains all of the ratio, aspect ratio, and pixel information on the content types that we covered today. If you need stock imagery, you can request access to the Georgia Digital Asset Library through our service desk. Our team maintains this library of stock photography, and it gets updated regularly. And you can also utilize websites like Pixabay that offer images under Creative Commons, so you don't have to worry about copyrighted images. There are also tools like Canva and Photoshop that are useful for resizing images. Photoshop is a paid program and it tends to be a little bit more complex in use, but Canva has a free version and I find it pretty user-friendly as well. I'll be sending out a follow-up email to all of you later today with the links to the resources that I mentioned above. But before we wrap up and go to questions, I'm going to give you a quick tutorial of how you can add padding around images to help with cropping. Before I switch my screens, I know that I've thrown around the word padding quite a bit. So what is it exactly? So padding is the amount of space between your image and the outer edge of your image. You can kind of think of padding as adding a margin around your image. So it kind of helps give you some wiggle room if the crop isn't exactly how you want it. So I'm going to exit out of our slides here. So here I use the staging environment. You can see that this is an illustration that I uploaded before I added some padding around it. It's not bad, but you can see the top of the head was cropped off here and the shoe. I want to fix it so that the full illustration shows. So I'm going to use Canva for our example here. So in Canva, since this is a tile displays at a 4:3, I'm going to create a canvas. That's a custom size. You can see I have it recent here. It's a 1024 by 768. This will ensure that we're working with what we need. I already have this image as an example here. So you can see I've put our illustration in the canvas that I've created. That's a 4:3 aspect ratio. And I have made sure that it's lined up in the center. I feel like this is really useful because it ensures your image isn't going to be a little off center either to the left or to the right. It's going to be exactly where you want it. This is honestly a trial and error process, like Donna was talking about with cropping the hero image to get the placement exactly where you want it. Sometimes I get it perfect on the first try. Other times I have a couple of drafts that I go through just to make sure that I get it just right. Since we have the issue with the tile displaying at a 16:9, I already know that it's going to be a little bit wide. So I don't worry about what's on the side, especially since there's so much white space around this image. I try to keep it consistent with as much of a margin, the same bit of margin at the top that's on the bottom, but it doesn't have to be precise. Again, trial and error. So here, I took this image, I downloaded it as a PNG file, and then I uploaded it again. Here, you can see on the tile with the padding, we're just a little bit of a margin there. The top of it, the head didn't get cropped out and the shoe didn't get cropped out. So it's a good way just to kind of have a little bit of wiggle room there, get the kind of crop that you need, and have a tile that you're really satisfied with. So now that I've went through this, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we can go through the chat and look for questions. Okay, it says, this one is from Catherine. It says, in Drupal, the image center mark plus sign, you can move to change the focus. Just making sure that I understood that correctly. Does the display change on the edit screen? Yes, that is right. I can pull an example of an image up in the back end just to kind of so it will show, here we go, let me share my screen again. So yes, that's correct. You can see here I went into the tile that I had into the image, and the little crosshair was what I was talking about with changing the focal point here. When you change it in the preview function, it does update and show you what it's going to look like in those different ratios as well.
It doesn't crop the image or edit it in any way. It just reestablishes where the center point for focus would be. Of note, that doesn't work on heroes. Heroes, you want your image the focus of your image to be right dead in the center. Moving that crosshair isn't going to help because the system is going to pin the center of your image to the center of the space available. We found that to be the most consistent way to deliver good heroes to y'all. So that's the one exception.
And with this image, when I did the demo, I didn't adjust the focal point first because I uploaded the original illustration and you saw the top of the head being cropped out a bit and the foot being cropped out. I already knew that changing that focal point wouldn't change the end result of the whole image not showing. So if you're uploading a tile and you don't mind if the whole thing is not showing, so let's just say you were satisfied with from here up showing, you just wanted his whole head to show and you didn't mind if his feet were cut off. Adjusting the focal point there would be fine instead of adding padding. But if it was an image that you really wanted to be able to show the whole thing there, adding padding is a good way to do that.
I didn't see any other questions in there, Erica, did you?
I didn't either. Anybody else?
All right.
All right. Well, if you all kind of process the information today and you think of questions later, you can feel free to put in a support ticket with us. Like I said, I'm going to follow up a little bit later with the resources that we mentioned today. Um, so yeah.
Thanks for spending 30 minutes with us. I hope that y'all got some taste of a takeaway that maybe you didn't know before. I saw somebody put that in the chat, and maybe it'll just make it a little bit less daunting if you're not a designer to get your images just right. So let us know if you have any questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day.